Last week I had a hot take. I was getting tired of the political divisiveness that Frieren has recently been a part of. See, a lot of fans of Frieren have unfortunately made it into a political battlefield where so many creators are framing it as this ice agent versus ultra feminist creator, or on the other way of seeing it, some imposing figure of hate and racism and all this nonsense. So, because I put out this video discussing these issues, a lot of people in the community sent me this video saying I need to watch this to understand that Freywin really is this right-wing leader of politics. So, I thought we could watch it together, and I can tell you what I think.
Over the last year, something really strange has happened. The same political movement that spent a decade telling us that the Founding Fathers were villains, our Constitution was structurally racist, and America itself was an illegitimate white settler colonial state built on...
So already, this is going to be a very heavily social issue conversation. So again, I'm not sure how any of this refers to Frieren, but I guess we'll find out. Let's keep watching.
Genocide and slavery has now suddenly rediscovered a deep reverence for pretty much all of these things. The left has gone all in on embracing this aesthetic. They dress themselves up as patriots and cosplay as the Founding Fathers while attending protests under the tagline, "No Kings."
This is so funny. So here in Arizona, this has been kind of an off and on thing. When I actually do see these little protests, it's like 25 to 50 people, everyone over the age of like 50 or 60. It's not like your average like your average Democrat that is just trying to live their life. They're not doing this crazy stuff, right? To frame all of them like this is a little silly.
And many on the right are just staring at this, completely dumbfounded. Didn't we just spend the last 10 years watching these same people essentially declare total war on the American mythos? All of us remember the Cultural Revolution that was the Great Awakening. We all lived through the 1619 Project.
That is very true. I could not be a content creator 10 years ago. Even though I'm moderate, I don't engage in politics, simply just having discussions in which people could get upset with me was terrible. Like, I was not welcome to the platform whatsoever. I was definitely judged based off of who I am, and they immediately were not having it.
The tearing down of statues and monuments, the incessant lecturing that America was never great to begin with, the very public character assassination attempts, and several of them were quite successful, against everyone from astrophysicists to CEOs.
Yeah, that one definitely sucks. That targeting people like that after their careers and stuff because they say things you don't like is pretty insane. Like I kind of understand it when somebody says something like, let's say, adheres to an ideology or doctrine that advocates for violence, because that's against any kind of standard for freedom of speech.
The relentless, personal, and ruthless attacks on white men for being the root of all evil in the world.
Remember the whole I couldn't be a content creator back? Yeah, okay.
The explicit attempt to shut them out of all institutions and elite career pathways. We were told there was nothing to celebrate about this country, and that its only hope for salvation would be to hand everything over to the very people who framed their hatred for us as a universal moral imperative. So what exactly are we supposed to believe? That the Founding Fathers were irredeemably evil in 2020, but now they're sacred guardians of liberty to invoke against the current occupant in the White House? Why does it seem like there's a sizable chunk of the political divide who expects us to accept their appeal to things they themselves were trying to tear down just a few years ago?
I mean, he has a very strong point about this. The fact that, 10 years ago, they were talking about how we need to totally rewrite how we, vote for presidencies, or they were talking about adding Supreme Court justices. Like, they were more than willing to degrade and remove it when they had the power. The moment the power shifted, then it would cause a reversal. But it's the same way with the other side of the spectrum, right? I mean, the conservative side as well is definitely like not a huge advocate for people's individual rights right now either. So it's like, yeah, it's true that the left definitely is playing this game, but we can't pretend like it's not dual side, which again is why I'm almost always in the middle, because I usually see that both sides are equally stupid.
I think you know where I'm going with this. You've already seen the title of this video. At the same time, there's been this huge blow-up over to what degree the American founding can be used as a political football by one side who openly hates this country. It's
hard to argue against that, right? Because no matter what side you on, if you are anyone like me, like an adherence or desire to listen to American traditionalist values, the left right now does not support that. So it's a very strong point, no matter, how you want to look at it.
A similar cultural battle over an anime that came out just a few years ago called...
Okay, now we finally got to the point where I'm here for. Having the discussion about Frieren, I have a feeling, right? I'm going to make a prediction. We're watching this together. I have a prediction that he is about to impose Western ideals on a Japanese story written by Mr. Yamato, a Japanese man, for Japanese people. So regardless of the fact that he had some good points, or at least some decent points, and the frames of like modern social behavior when it pertains to that political ideological argumentation, I feel like he's about to make a lot of inferences that don't line up with the story or Japanese mythos. So we'll see if I'm right. Let's see.
Frieren, Beyond Journey's End. A handful of left-wing anime fans have argued that, like every other cultural icon of the last decade, Frieren obviously belongs to them.
This is what I made my video about. Not specifically just left people, but just the left and the right. They both just went to a Twitter war over this, and it drove me insane. Like, anytime I was looking up anything fiction-related, fantasy-related, trying to, put something else spicy for X, I got hit with these constantly. It was driving me up a wall.
But there's just one problem. Frieren is as close to being explicitly right-wing as any anime possibly could be.
I called it. You owe me $5. I don't know who I bet against, but you owe me $5. Okay, let's break this down. First of all, Frieren, again, is written by Mr. Yamato, a Japanese man from Japan, for Japanese people. What's about to happen is Christian is going to impose his interpretation of the ideology for the show on it itself. And I can tell you just outright, we haven't even gotten to the points yet. I'm going to be able to debunk each of these with just a basic comprehension skills about Japanese culture. Let's do it.
And it's right-wing in a way that explains virtually everything that's happening to American politics.
Oh, did you hear that, boys? It's not just conservative. It breaks down every problem with those damn Democrats. I mean, that's what you sound like, dude. Seriously, this is what happens when an entire generation of people are raised on a concept that, one, everything has to be political, and two, everything fits Western conservative or liberal ideological bases. That is insanity to anybody that's not a American central individual. Anybody that has any concept of the reality that we are a multi-billion people world and 216 countries, and you think there's this Japanese anime, an excellent manga by the way, is about your ideology that compares to what liberals are in America. Okay, yeah, this is gonna be well
at the moment. Now, for those of you who haven't seen it, here's what you need to know about the world of Frieren.
Hold on, I gotta back up real quick. Before we get into the demon conversation, this is also a great example of a lack of media literacy. He is imposing Western values and ideals on a system that was not written by it whatsoever. So it's easily to see that the comprehension skills in the modern day for how to read a story is completely lost. I don't know if they just don't teach kids this anymore or what have you, but there is no understanding of what literacy under media is.
And they've evolved a very specific survival strategy.
Okay, so first of all, we already have to stop because we have to have the demon conversation. Demons in Japan for Japanese culture is not the same as Western Christian versions of demons. Demons in the Asian culture is based off the concepts of Buddhism, which refers to them as evil spirits, typically adorned from people that had died with intense regret that has never been resolved, or if they committed an atrocity over their lifetime that they never atoned for under the Buddhist philosophy. The other ideology for them is that they are monsters, beings that are like predation species, but they prey upon humans, which is far different than the Christian religious aspect that are of demons. So I already know we're about to have a discussion on demons, and he's about to misinterpret it.
They look almost exactly like humans. They have the same bodies, they have the same faces, They even speak with the same voices.
So if you've ever read Dante's Inferno, you'll find out the demons in the Christian value or the Christian system don't look like humans. They look like, well, big scary red monsters. While if you look at the Japanese version, this would be the evil spirit version.
The only thing that really gives them away are the small horns on their head. And you've got to remember, these things have spent centuries studying human beings and learning how to blend into society. They've picked up human speech and behavioral patterns, but none of it's
just like the evil spirits do.
real. The whole thing is a performance. It's a manipulative play with one purpose and one purpose only: to weasel their way into a position close enough to do what they actually came to do, which is to eat the humans themselves.
This also goes into the framing of absolutism, which again, like my catchphrase always says, is the lowest form of cognitive thinking. So demons follow the same philosophy of the Buddhist yin and yang. What you'll see is that he won't talk about it, but aspects of demon mentality do teach humanity and do end up being useful for humanity throughout the course of the story. For example, the way magic combat is taught and later developed by humanity is learned originally by demons. Another inference we can talk about is how demons have made it into the city and had found a use for it. Well, they were trying to damage the city, but they were also becoming useful in their regard, right? So it's never an absolute in Japanese culture. It's always a yin and yang mentality. We're going to get into the conversation of elves a little later, and we'll see that.
And in one of the most memorable scenes of the first season, Frieren's party encounters a demon that has taken the form of a young girl. Now, I want you to pay close attention to what happens next. The human hero of this party, Himmel, simply can't bring himself to strike this demon down.
So basically what is going on is that he does not follow the concept of yin and yang in the fact that he is trying to be an absolute good. He cannot find himself the courage to slay the creature. This shows a lack of wisdom, this shows a lack of judgment, and this shows a Puritan behavior. Because of that is why he fails.
Even after it had just murdered and eaten another child. From Himmel's perspective, all that he sees is a small and frightened girl, not a monster with no compassion for its victims. And so he just can't do it. He can't swing his sword and strike this demon down because it goes against his own principles, his own moral compass, really his...
Right, because he deviated from the Buddhist path. So one of the things we have to remember is that individualism is a Western philosophical basis. Japanese culture adheres to more of a dogma associated with the community, what's best for all. So it is actually more of an interpretation that his individualistic values in that moment superseded his Buddhistic yin and yang casting judgment upon the demon, and that is what leads to this next part.
His entire worldview.
Because I can already tell where this is going.
What happens next is that the village chieftain steps forward and offers to take the demon in as one of his own. He basically promises to raise it as a human and to show it love and compassion. But in doing so, he's playing right into the demon's hands. It has no interest in integrating into human society or reforming itself along humanity's moral order. All it's interested in is manipulating the emotions and principles of the humans around it in order to continue killing.
Again, this is a Western interpretation, so we already know this is incorrect. However, the flaw of this is that through the speedy pictures we see of the character, of her doing so, she has a plethora of opportunities to kill both of the daughter and the chieftain, but she doesn't. So it is a very easy plot hole because her actions that end up, her actions basically deciding to end this facade, as he says, leads with her being caught, which doesn't make sense for the character arc of herself, because if she truly was without any level of good, then one, she would have went after the daughter first, because the daughter was the one that's the easiest to get rid of, and second, she would have done it far sooner than she does in the story.
And so, tragically...
Here, perfect. She's alone with the daughter. There's no one around. She has more than an opportunity to eat her right now and then go back to the home to get him. She doesn't. This is because there are systems in place, and absolutism is almost never the answer. There's a reason it's the lowest form of thinking, because it doesn't make sense in most cases. Explain, if he can, why she doesn't eat her here, but goes after the father later.
Same principles that drove this family to open up their home ultimately result in the village chieftain being killed, his homestead burned to the ground, and his daughter nearly suffering the same fate as the first child that Himmel
So why did she not eat the daughter here? This is what happens when you take something out of context, because she had no intention to do so.
failed to avenge. Finally, Frieren steps forward to do what Himmel couldn't.
All right, now let's have a conversation on elves. Elves, in Japanese culture, are the framing of the opposite of demons. They also live for nearly eternity. They're considered forest or nature spirits. They are here to teach wisdom, guidance, and the Buddhist mentalities to humanity. They are considered humans allies in the spirit realm because it's the ones that are more on the benevolent aspect of the spectrum while still having the ability to cause harm, just as Frieren does. She also ignites her wisdom because she's resetting the clock of neutrality again in the Buddhist yin-yang mentality, ending this dark spirit by using a light spirit. Again, Japanese culture does not have Christian concepts of angels. So this is their, not really version of it, but it's their good aspect of the spirit realm.
And in this moment, we learn everything we need to know about the world of Frieren. The demon cries out yet again for a mother it doesn't even have. And when Frieren presses it on it, it finally admits that it's simply a magic word that keeps people from killing them.
Based. Super cool scene, by the way. Super cool.
As Frieren herself explains,
again, back to I know I'm going to beat a dead horse here, but Japanese culture about evil spirits. Evil spirits are not always there to simply just eat people. They are there to deceive and break people from the Buddhist desire of finding, that harmony. So they're not just there to attack people. They're there to break you will-wise or morally.
The point here is
take you away from the path.
That demons use human empathy and morality to their own advantage, despite never adhering to those moral principles themselves. The entire thing is a trick, designed to cause what would otherwise be the demon's enemies from recognizing themselves as such. This is why I said earlier that Frieren is deeply right-wing. So much so that there's an entire collection of memes pointing this fact out.
Okay, so like I said, I was just as frustrated with the left that I am, or with the right as I am with the left with this, claiming her to be an ICE agent. Utterly ridiculous. It's not about demons trying to, impose a multiculturalist thing. This is a Western interpretation to a Japanese story. It's ridiculous.
And this one scene from a Japanese anime perfectly explains the current state.
You just said it's a Japanese anime, yet you're still posing Western values on it.
Of American politics for years. Arguably decades even. The Constitution, the rule of law, separation of powers, checks and balances, federalism, the founders' vision for this entire country. All of these things are generational commitments on the right. We see them as essential elements to who we are as Americans. They have to be honored and defended, even when doing so is painful. And even when honoring them means sometimes losing. But this is exactly why the left appeals to these things. Even if they don't fully understand the reason why, they do understand that these things carry an almost mythic power in the minds of conservatives. And it's a mythic power they're all too happy to exploit when it suits them.
That's pretty heavy, man. Again, one of the most famous quotes is, do not impose on malice what can be imposed on misunderstanding. I'm not quoting it exactly, but you kind of know what I'm referring to. It's basically saying that when there's a misunderstanding or a misalignment, it is far more reasonable to assume that it's a misunderstanding of somebody that's illogical than it is for someone to be malicious. The argument basically is that the entire left organization of politics in the Western world is this homogenized, perfect, in synced, demonic. They're here to destroy the Western world. It's obscene. It's utterly ridiculous to say that there are, that they're homogenous. They're not. You can talk to three different Democrats and they'll tell you three completely different things. And it's because there is no framing of it. This requires such a malicious view of the world. it's inherently worrying. And the reason it's worrying to me is that it's the same reason I called out the left for their extremism just, let's say, 10 years ago, where they were doxing people, getting people fired, or like recent events with like the death of Charlie Kirk, rest in peace to him. All he did is, speak and give people a chance to speak, and they killed him for it. That is very dangerous. That is the use of politics to be violent, and I am 100% against it. But what he's doing right now is dehumanizing the left, which I think is just as wrong when the left dehumanizes the right. Either side, it's wrong. The moment you try to treat another American, regardless of politics, like less than human, you have lost me. I don't care if everything you said prior I agree with, you've lost me.
Perhaps there's no better recent example of this than this year's Democrat State of the Union rebuttal. Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger deliberately chose to deliver it from the chamber of North America's oldest legislative body in Williamsburg, just a few miles from the site of the first.
This assumes that they don't usually do that. And from my understanding, it's been pretty common. But go on.
First English colony at Jamestown, and the birth of America's independence at Yorktown. And in this speech, what did we see? Explicit references to the Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, and the Bill of Rights.
Yeah, but again, we always do this, right? When the Democrats were in power, the conservatives were ultra about this same thing. Like if you go back to the Biden administration, conservatives did this as well. This is a homogenous action that both sides take, like congruent, same. They both take the same behavior with this. So unless you're willing to call it out when it's done on the other side, then I can't take this seriously. Now, look at the current administration. There are steps to say denaturalize certain citizens. Well, naturalization of citizenship has always been like a universal supportive notion for the United States. So to say that that it's not happening on the right is a bit silly to me, right?
Invoking the story of America's independence from tyranny, direct appeals to
what our founders envisioned.
Spanberger even went so far as to quote George Washington and regurgitate the old conservative adage about law and order, yet somehow twist it into an attack on ICE, even after an illegal migrant from Sierra Leone with 30 prior arrests stabbed a woman at a bus stop in Northern Virginia.
To frame American independence as anti-ICE is really stupid. ICE is a U.S.-based system protecting citizens from obviously illegals. That is just a blatant fact. Now, we could go into the argument that they are dehumanizing people and treating people against what we would consider what should be human behavior. That's totally fine. We can have that discussion. But let's not pretend that they're anything other than what they are. They are a federally recognized system there to protect our borders. That is just blatant fact.
Keep in mind, all of this was happening at the same time the Democratic Party in the state she governs is advancing bills to terminate Virginia's cooperation agreements with ICE, limit the ability of law enforcement to share information with federal immigration agents, ban immigration arrests near courthouses, and turn schools into ICE-free zones.
So I won't get into the whole thing about how, what side is, supporting criminality versus non-criminality. But, again, it's a tactic that both sides would use, right? For example, when Biden was doing his whole shtick, Texas was threatening to secede from the Union, right? Like they're going to do it again. So it's not like don't do this when the opposite side is in power. Very stronghold states that are avert to that political system is not immediately ready to jump into posing it against it. So again, I'm not going to get into the argument of whether or not, Virginia has the right to do any of this. I stay away from politics, but the important aspect of it is that I don't remember you making a video framing this about Texas.
And the same illegal alien who stabbed a woman to death at a bus stop in Northern Virginia, that all happened literally the day before her speech. And a week later, Spanberger refused to hand him over to ICE for deportation.
That's insane. This is a murderer. This is an illegal. This is criminality. This person should probably face the death penalty for murder. If we're generous, we just send them back to their country. That again, unquestionable. Doesn't matter your politics. Murder is murder.
Does she believe this is what the founders would have wanted? Illegal migrants from another continent coming here and killing Americans?
So his take is a lack of empathy. Obviously, that's what Democrats believe. Democrats believe, just like conservatives, that they are adhering to the most American thing that they can do, which is in the best interest of America at the time. Whether or not I agree or disagree on either side of the spectrum is irrelevant. What matters is the fact that, yes, again, you are attempting to dehumanize them because it's easier than their concept of morality is different than yours. I think that most people would agree that hiding a murderous illegal is retarded, but that doesn't mean that, that doesn't mean that they don't have some case of the fact that there are people being dehumanized for being illegal, which are, again, two different conversations.
How do you stand there in the birthplace of America, quote the founding fathers, and then go home and do everything in your power to govern in a way that would horrify them? The answer, of course, is that she isn't confused, and she's not being inconsistent. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's invoking the things she knows conservatives hold sacred, because invoking them constrains conservative action. The moment her party is back in power and the Constitution becomes an obstacle rather than a shield, it will stop.
Obviously, if we're going to talk about the Constitution, I would say it's probably more than likely that conservatives see it as a foundational piece never to be questioned, while a Democratic is more of a loosey-goosey methodology of, like, a living document, I think is the term that Democrats use or liberals use frequently. And this kind of goes into that. Just because you think it's a living document doesn't mean it's not a document to adhere to. It just means you think it's susceptible to change, which, again, can be oxymoronic, it can be hypocritical. I'm not saying that he's wrong in those regards. I'm just saying that it's not infallible to say she is going to pick and choose that this is an aspect of a dead document, as in she wants to adhere to whatever aspect she wants to live on with that one.
Stop being a sacred document and go back to being a relic of white supremacy.
He's got a good point here. I mean, the New York Times is supposed to be a moderate take. The Think is definitely not moderate, but if you do post something like this, the Constitution is broken and should not be reclaimed, then an adherence to it afterwards and saying, oh, you must obey this, would be wrong. It would be a blatant hypocrisy. It would be something that you should not be taken seriously because your words mean nothing. However, you have to show me her saying that. You're showing me a liberal viewpoint of that, but you're not showing that it was her viewpoint, right? Because you're lumping an entire political movement into one person's take of it, interpretation of it.
Like it did before. And this gets to the fundamental problem at the heart of American politics right now. To conservatives, the Constitution is—
Bro, are we serious right now? We throwing American great hats on people? We'll throw it on Holo instead. That one makes at least a little bit more sense.
The civic Bible. It's the cornerstone of America's identity. It's the guarantor of liberty for its people, and the crowning achievement of our country's contribution to political philosophy. But to the left, the Constitution is something else entirely. They don't appeal to the Constitution because they believe in it.
You are avoiding the conversation of living document versus dead document, which, again, can lead to hypocrisy, but it's not inherently.
They appeal to the Constitution because you do. To the left, the Constitution is at best just a procedural tool to invoke when it gets you what you want. And at worst, it's a founding document of white supremacy written by white patriarchal slave owners to protect a system of oppression that progressives are determined to tear down.
See, that is a good point. So like this Loria Williamson, I would not take seriously if she ever invoked the Constitution. If any politician came out and supported us this kind of blog, I would not support any value of their interpretation of the Constitution. I very much adhere to traditionalist values, and I will continue to live in a moderate state because I think both sides fuck this up.
Sometimes, quite literally. It's the political—
Yeah, like tearing down of statues because they once owned slaves or something. Utterly ridiculous, right? Because that's what most of the reasoning for removal of these statues were. Adherence to a morality take and infer it on like the birth of America is, again, retarded. It requires no media literacy. It requires no concept of interpretation or no understanding of history or its values and respective to it. Because you would not have, let's say I'm talking to a Democrat now, you would not have the behavior and mentalities you have now if it wasn't for those same leaders leading to it. It's a step-by-step process that leads to a greater moral values. To dehumanize them is also retarded.
Equivalent of that same survival mechanism that demons have in the world of Frieren, which might conveniently explain why a subset of the left openly identifies with them in online discourse.
See, again, this is imposing Western idealism onto a Japanese show. And these people tell on themselves. Like if I was a staunch into one side or the other, the first thing I would do, like let's say I joined the Democratic Party tomorrow for this, the first thing I would do is silence these retards, because all you do is give ammunition to the right when you do this kind of shit. These kinds of fringe extremists do nothing but, one, subvert the actual story that they're talking about when it comes to Frieren, and two, they are imposing the most extreme ideological basis of that side and are positioning it as the front runner, which gives people like him, Christian, a platform to say this kind of thing. What about free speech? What about free speech? What about the fact that the damage that this person has infringed upon your party is why you keep losing?
Of course, these two views are not compatible. There's no political system on Earth, no matter how well written or long-lasting it may be, that can survive a dynamic where one side treats its founding principles as a bedrock of civilization and the other treats them as a means to deceive their enemies. So what does this all teach us?
So which is which?
Well, for years now, I would argue that almost everyone on the right has been able to feel this, even if they've struggled to put it into words. The left has spent a long time essentially abusing deeply held conservative principles in order to force them into situations that actively harms them. And they've just expected to keep getting away with this as long as they can string together the right magic words. That's precisely—
I would say it's more like an adherence to dehumanize the right, and they just did it a lot sooner, and they've had a lot more power to do it for a longer period of time. And it's getting to a point to where the pendulum is swinging in the opposite direction again. And because of that, the dehumanization is starting to come to the other end, pushing back against them. But this push and pull mentality is far more vicious.
Precisely what the demon does in Frieren.
I also want to point out the fact that conservatives aren't killing people. Tell that to Charlie Kirk, right? If you want to pretend that you are a moral high ground, you can never support the death of a political voice.
It doesn't need to overpower Himmel. It just needs him to hesitate and to doubt whether he's looking at an enemy at all.
So this is when we're back to Frieren, and he's imposing his own ideological basis in a show that has nothing to do with it.
But this spell only has power over someone who believes in it. And this is what the right has been painfully slow to come to terms with. The Constitution, the rule of law, separation of powers, checks and balances, the revolution did. The rules and procedures only came after the question was settled as to who this country belonged to and what overarching vision would govern it.
Yeah.
Right now, there's a new battle being waged over those first-order questions, and recognizing this isn't an act of cynicism or an abandonment of principle.
Well, it's a shifting of principle, right? Because if we truly believe it's an infallible document to only be changed in like the most absurd and insane decisions, like when we add more amendments that we need, like, you know, giving more people the right to vote, etc., or making sure people can't be discriminated against, then we understand that it has to progress as we go. But it's very tiny, minute changes over time, which still is trying to adhere to the fact that it's a dead document, and it's only the changes that they add are not actually fundamental changes. They are adding to the core values that the Constitution adheres to, while the living document mentality basically says the opposite, that we can change it whatever we want to whenever we want. So it's a slippery slope a bit, because it's like, okay, if we do just fundamentally change the way the Constitution gives Americans rights, because at the time, conservatives, for example, see a notion of extreme immigration issue, which again, that's a discussion for somebody that wants to get into that more. Does that mean you can, remove their rights to make it easier to remove them, for example? Right? Do they not receive due process? Well, most conservatives would still say, at least from my understanding, that they should still have due process, but that means that they still could be deported at the end, while others are saying, no, just kick them all out. So it's like, are you just going to suspend certain rights because it's inconvenient at the time? Because that's, again, dehumanizing and a pretty dangerous rhetoric. Because the moment you claim that, then you're just saying the left has the same. Because most of conservative, the fact of people saying when the left had power and they were abusing it, that we had an inherent constitution to say that was wrong. And that was a fundamental precedent that put, for example, the orange man into a seat of power, because people collectively said they are betraying our fundamental principles and we hate it, which is why he won. So if you immediately turn around and start playing the same game, aren't you only inevitably writing your own loss? Basically, it's like, in fantasy writing sense, it's like, do you either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain? Are you basically just adhering to the concept of Sun Tzu, just become the villain?
To go back to the Frieren analogy for just a moment, when she strikes the demon down, does she somehow stop protecting the humans she cares about? Does she become the demon herself? No. She just stops pretending that extending mercy to something that will use that mercy to keep killing is synonymous with being merciful itself.
She's a good spirit. She's there to fight the evil spirits, yin and yang. That's why she's there. Anyways.
Ultimately, the right doesn't need to stop believing in the Constitution or the rule of law. It just needs to stop extending these principles in a universal, automatic, and good faith manner to the very forces that have made it clear that they'll invoke them when convenient and discard them when they're not.
That was a crazy theory. Can you back it up with any level of logic? Like, how do you apply that? Just adhere to the law, just not for them. Kind of goes back to my original meme or a short that I made for this. Just get rid of those damn dirty demons. Send them back where they belong.
And doing so isn't a betrayal of what the founders built or stood for. It's actually the only way any of it can possibly survive.
Okay, so here's my breakdown. It obviously takes Western idealism and sticks it into a Japanese story to talk about his political narrative. I think he made some wild takes. I think he has a very dangerous rhetoric, and I hate that framing because it appeals to a emotionally charged language where it's like, oh, you're just trying to call him evil so you can dehumanize his, or say his speech doesn't matter because you consider it dangerous. The reason I consider it dangerous is it's adhering to an ideology that the left has been practicing, which led to the death of Charlie Kirk. It's basically like you were dehumanizing us and using that so you can use an act for call of violence that eventually leads to violence. Therefore, we're just going to do it back to you. Which, again, is very, very extremist mentality. And I'm very against any extremism, regardless of left or right. Ultimately speaking, he has a bad interpretation of Frieren. I don't accept his interpretation. It requires a very, very low IQ, lack of media illiteracy that shows that he doesn't know what he's referring to, and he is imposing his Western values, specifically his Christian conservative Western values, onto the show. Just like the same people that were using it for the left. They're the same group of people. He just says it better. Anyways, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Back to the realms.